It's Momo Monday. Yes, the first Momo Monday in a while. And that means that some people may be new to this channel and don't know what Momo Monday is. So before we get into it, I'm going to explain what Momo Monday is. Momo Monday was something I started a while back as sort of a what's the happiest thing on the internet? And I thought that was cat videos. Well, I happen to have a lot of cats. So I show cat videos and pictures on Momo Mondays because Momo is a very large cat and he has a lot of friends. And I talk about some topic related to mental or emotional well-being on Momo Mondays. And the first thing we do, because this is about kind of centering yourself and kind of chilling, we take a couple of deep breaths. So everybody breathe with me. Breathe in. And out. And breathe in. And out. So what we're talking about this week is disagreeing respectfully, specifically the W5H of disagreeing respectfully. The who, what, when, where, why, and how of this. And this came up because there have been a few things that have been going on this week that all sort of became this confluence of events that made me think, okay, this is an important thing to talk about or a timely thing to talk about. And in the feedback session for the Lara Croft Lady Bits episode, I said off the top that this was going to be a brainstorming session. Now, back when I was in school, brainstorming was taught as a skill. When someone says, okay, we're going to brainstorm, the people involved knew that this meant you just fire out a bunch of ideas. We don't spend time debating the ideas. We get them all out on the table. And that is so that people can speak freely about their ideas without fear of criticism. And people jumped in, and fortunately they did it to me and at first instead of other people in the chat. And so I checked them on it, saying, whoa, hey, this isn't what we're doing here. And some people got a little disgruntled. I don't think these are bad people. I don't think they did anything wrong. But I think it's interesting that the awareness of appropriate time and place for disagreement, it has slipped. And so I thought this is why I should do this video. Now, starting off with the who of disagreeing respectfully. Are you talking to a stranger or are you talking to a friend? Are you talking to a family member or are you talking to a work colleague? Who are you talking to? It's fairly common sense in broad principles that you speak to different types of people differently. You wouldn't speak to your friend the same way you speak to your mom. Usually, for instance, just as a very obvious example, you're not going to disagree with your boss about certain things that you may disagree with, somebody who's can't fire you. These things are common sense. But when you get into internet discussions, this becomes a bit more of a challenge. And that's important to remember because you're not speaking to people a lot of the times you know especially well. And it's very important to recognize that, because what that means is you can't make the same assumptions about how something you say is going to be interpreted. I know, for instance, on this YouTube channel, I can make fart jokes and you guys love it. You guys really like the Gaelic humor, as my stepfather would say. But in other places, that may not be so appropriate. This is very subjective and this can be quite difficult for some people. So I think if in doubt, if you're talking to somebody you don't know terribly well, err on the side of really being clear, really communicating the details of the disagreement. Now I'm going to stop that there now because that's going to come up later. It's going to come up in the how portion. And this is very important. So let's stick a pin in that and move on to the what. What are you disagreeing about? What is the topic? What are the sensitivities surrounding the topic? Disagreeing on whether or not you like a particular song or you like a particular movie is different than disagreeing about whether you like a particular food. And these are both clearly different topics to something like religion or politics, where the stakes are much higher, emotions run much hotter and closer to the surface, and so on and so forth. There are some people that you can have great debates with, you can disagree, and everybody walks away friends. Nobody gets offended, except on certain topics. And everyone has those topics. I have said a few times on this YouTube channel, like, guys, I'm not going to debate this topic. I can't stay calm about it. It's too personal. Please respect that. And for the most part, people on this channel do. A few people, try to pick the scab. And those are people I realize are not worth debating because they can't disagree respectfully. So that's the idea of what. Moving on to when. This is something that I want to be very cautious. I don't want anybody thinking that I'm being judgmental, because the when, I think, is one of the things that are the hardest to determine. And there's a lot of information you may or may not know. When is appropriate to disagree about something? And, the example is kind of like right after somebody dies, there's this outpouring of, oh, they were brilliant and shiny, and you don't tend to talk about their flaws very much, when they're barely in the ground. Or cremated, as the case may be. Some people have an issue with this. Some people don't like people being deified that way during a funeral. But it's out of respect for the survivors. And if you're gonna disagree with something somebody did right after they pass away, keep in mind that you're not being respectful. If you're doing that deliberately, if you're deliberately disrespecting the person and their family, fine, you're doing it consciously. Conscious choice, no problem. But keep in mind that it is not the best time. Now, the other time frame thing I want to bring up, and this is pertinent to some stuff that happened at E3 last week, is there is a statute of limitations on certain comments. A tweet should not be something that's brought up years later as a, how could you say that thing? I think it is fair to go back on someone's Twitter history and say to them, like, you were for this position 3 years ago, you're against it now, what's changed? Give the people a chance to explain the evolution in their thinking. But what a lot of people do is, you said this back then, rah! And that's not respectful disagreement. If somebody said something just offensive in the last couple months, yeah, okay. Couple years, less relevant. Everybody has their less than proud moments on Twitter. Everybody has their less than proud moments on Facebook. They could have been going through a bad time. They could have been angry at the world. We don't know what. But there does have to be something of a statute of limitations. And while we're talking about Twitter, let's move on to where. Appropriate settings for discussion. And I know there are certain topics I just will not talk about on Twitter. The other where thing that I think is super important, other than is something an appropriate setting, period, is consider whether your disagreements with someone should be private or public. And this is where I think call-out culture goes so horribly wrong. Someone is going to be much more open to your criticisms, to your disagreements, if you allow them to save face. If you can, talk to the person in private as opposed to shaming them in public, because you will likely get a much better result. And this moves into the why. Personally, I don't know about you guys, but I personally think that when people try to shame people in public, they do these big pageants of disagreement. I have a harder time trusting their motivations than if they speak to me in private. I know that if someone speaks to me in private, they're likely more willing to have a conversation than trying to score points in public, because there's an element of theater. And one of the things I know I do when I think about whether I am going to accept or reject a criticism is, do I think that this person is trying to criticizing or disagreeing with me to make me better, to help me, to improve my content, respectful of what I want to do with my content? Or are they trying to score points with a particular online mob or contingent or political party or whatever? Are they using me to make themselves seem more awesome by making me seem less awesome? And if that is the case, if I think this is just disagreement theater, I'm not going to listen to them. I'm not going to take that criticism, that disagreement seriously. If there's a lot of, talking points spewed and all that stuff, I tend to tune out as well. But that goes into the how of the matter. So I'll hold off. I'm almost there. But the reason, if somebody seems to have good intentions for disagreeing, I am much more likely to, first of all, engage them in conversation at all. Because if you think someone is just trolling, the best thing to do is ignore them. But if I think someone is coming, best face forward with good intent, I'm much more likely to be receptive to the disagreement than someone who, for instance, ignored the ground rules of a conversation. And that's why it's so important to keep in mind what parameters, what boundaries people put on a conversation. And you may not think those boundaries are fair. And you might very well be right. But you have to be prepared that if you violate those boundaries, for good reason or not so good reason, be prepared to not be seen as respectfully disagreeing. Now, all this being done, and this is a lot of the stuff I think tends to get neglected in discussions. Now we come to the how. How do you disagree so that you disagree respectfully? And obviously there are some people who cannot accept any disagreement. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking people like myself who enjoy a good debate as long as I feel that it's in bounds. Details really matter in respectful disagreements. Even when there's no character limit, some people will go on at length about how wrong they think I am, about how stupid they think I am, and I must be some kind of idiot, and they said this and they said that. What they miss in these fairly lengthy tirades is the specific details of what they disagree with and why. And this is something, I can't believe how often this gets left out. The number of times I have heard somebody talking about my work or seen somebody writing about my work, and they say, I don't agree with everything she says, but, and then they go on to praise me. I am very curious about those points of disagreement. I don't think that I have the market cornered on good ideas. And I certainly do not think my ideas are perfect. I am very curious about hearing the specific points of disagreement that someone might have. Because in a lot of cases, when I finally say, what did you disagree with? They'll be like, well, this comment. I said, well, that wasn't me. I was quoting Simone de Beauvoir or Judith Butler or, some other feminist thinker, because I try to provide people with the roots of some of the arguments. It might not even be something I agree with. Betty Friedan, there's a lot I think is amazing about the feminine mystique. There are limitations to it. And that doesn't mean the work is garbage. That doesn't mean we throw out the whole thing. Unfortunately, in this day and age, you made one mistake, junk, which isn't the reality. That is not respectful disagreement. You don't find one thing somebody screwed up on and use that to discredit them in all things. No one could ever get an idea to stand if that were true, because we're all imperfect people. And so I'm really interested in these points of disagreement, because if somebody has a point, well, guess what? That makes me better. So that is the Momo Monday on disagreeing respectfully. Disagreement can be good for you. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. But the other thing is, I think that, and I don't quite know where this goes in, maybe the how as well. A disagreement should be between two people. It should not be, 200 on one, unless that one person is an elected official or has some power of office behind them that makes the playing field more level. If you're ganging up on someone, that is not disagreement, that is bullying. Okay, keep that in mind. And so again, the when and the where and the check someone's timeline. If you've seen something on a message board, or you've seen a video and it's gone viral, check to see if the person is already being bombarded with stuff. Because if somebody's already made your point and you don't feel the need to just say, like, look, I agree with them and this is why, there's no point in just cussing the person out all over again. That just makes people scared and hurt. It doesn't actually change anyone's mind. Not really. They may claim to have their mind changed. They may be giving lip service to having their mind changed, but they're really not changing their mind. They're just shutting up. So speaking of shutting up, that's what I'm going to do right now. You'll notice my voice still isn't totally back, but we're going to close out with 2 more deep breaths. So this is what we do on Momo Mondays. Breathe in. And out. And breathe in. And out.